Hello, creators. We're talking about Joseph of Nez Perce. That's what he's famously known for being Joseph of Nez Perce. But if you don't know who I am Joshua Lamb. I'm an ink artist as well as an all around artist. Here I bring drawings of religion, spirituality, history together for everybody. And today we're doing Chief Joseph. Now, this is a really cool story because I didn't know anything about this because it's Native American Heritage Month in the United States, and as well as I'm filming a documentary on the indigenous in Canada and North America. So, the Nez Perce people are known for their horse. That's one of the things they're known for, and there's a really good reason why, because this horse, the Appaloosa horse, is the beautiful spotted horse that has the one that I saw was like light brown spots that are kind of encircled in white center with a white outside. But yeah, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful horse. Something to be proud of. I don't know how to draw horses very well, but I'm attempting to do it using, I think I'm using, this is a 5B pencil here, and just kind of sketching out what I think is the pose should be, because I kind of want to facing, but I kind of want to showcase it, muscular structure, and then I also want Joseph to be facing the viewer straight on. I don't need to see his hips. I don't need to see most of his lower body. I'm taking a photo reference of his younger clothing and older. He only has a few photos, and it's kind of mixing everything together to kind of build him out as well as the Appaloosa horse. I'm taking a different horses and building it and reconstructing it how I want. But yeah, so Joseph was born in 1840. It's about 200 years ago, right? And this is back when, there was progression, and there was stuff happening. And we think that the indigenous people being something long ago, cowboys and Indians, something a little bit too far from us now. But that's not true. They're actually very close. Only 200 years ago is only like my grandmother's grandmother, roughly, because my grandmother was born in 1920. Her mother was like 1850, right? And this was when Joseph was around, 1850. They had a treaty of Walla Walla in 1855, which was this treaty between the Nez Perce and the U.S. government. But of course, the U.S. government, didn't keep their promises and stuff, and just kept on trying to snatch up the lands. And in the late 1800s, this tension really grew, and there's a lot of broken promises and cultural clashes that heightened tensions and so on. You can see I'm drawing the spots right here. I'm not being very accurate. I'll come over this and kind of fix everything once I have everything laid out. I'm sure Joseph's legs won't match, so I'll have to rearrange some portions. I'm not going too heavy, being too serious right now with the drawing. But so Joseph, he's leading over this people. His father Joseph passes, he takes over, and his people expect him to defend this place, and he does. Chief Joseph, along with a fraction of the Nez Perce leaders, resisted forces of relocation to a reservation. They're like, no, not doing it. We ain't those kind of people. And this marked the beginning of the Nez Perce War. So then in June 1877, which is cool because one of his buddies, Whitebird, they had this battle at Whitebird Canyon, which is named after him. And this battle was under the leadership of Joseph and Whitebird, and it displayed like a crazy brilliant strategy in achieving significant victory over the U.S. forces. Like, they would take a few hits, but then the U.S. would take a lot of damage and lose a lot of men. And then just a few months later, in August, there was the Battle of Big Hole, and the Nez Perce continued their journey. And then tragedy struck in August in the Battle of Big Hole, where a clash between the U.S. forces resulted in significant casualties on both sides. And this was uncool because both lost a great amount because of this battle. And then they tried to escape to Canada, but they were facing like all these issues of trying to get there and retreating. And despite their attempts, They were chased down, which is just wild to think when you really dig into history. You're like, I mean, I'm an American, and these stories were not taught in this light my whole life. And as I dig deeper now and actually meet indigenous people and go to their reservations and see what their stories about, there's so much of my heart that is just torn up because of what I'm learning. And side note, me shaving here this is fun to keep my pencils sharp and also keep the shading edges easier on the paper. Highly recommend it. I used to use mechanical pencils, but they're so hard. Usually the lead that I get for them is kind of hard, and it tears the paper and leaves the hard dents into the paper. Something a little bit softer of lead works really well here, and it erases beautifully and it smudges well. But preferably I use like a 2H or a 4H when sketching. But in this case, the paper and this kind of lead works well to it, and I was just going to use it. So, but yeah, back to Joseph. So then they had another battle in September 1877, where there was all this rugged terrain, and the Nez Perce engaged the U.S. forces. They come across this creek called Camas Creek, and they have a whole bunch of battles along this way, right? And Joseph here shows some really good strategy by having his warriors fight along this terrain, and he knows the terrain. His people know the terrain. That's what this is what they do. And the U.S. forces are trying to pursue him, and they're just not getting through, right? General Oliver O. Howard is just pushing his men through. They're like, man, these mountains, these creeks, not working out. But they both take casualties, but it shows Joseph knows what he's trying to do. He's just trying to escape. He's trying to make it to Canada. America's like, no, do not betray us for the Canadians. I don't know. I don't know what Howard was actually thinking. And it's interesting because the information that you may gather through the textbooks and history may even be subject to how someone else may portray the battle of Ben. I find that rarely can you even find modern days that someone has done something and they try to portray their accurate feelings and what they meant for it, and the people are still alive and people are still getting it wrong. So how much more with a man who lived 200 years ago? But we can see by the actions that the Nez Perce really tried to get away and settle and keep their culture alive. And we'll see this throughout history, in the American history and even Canadian history, of them kind of cleansing the native people. So now I have my pens here, and I just got this new Prisma. I'm really excited to use it. The thing about different pens is that they bleed differently, and then the color of black is different on different pens. The Prisma is not the same color as the Copic I'm using, as well as the other pens I've been using. I'm just drawing in his face here with lines, simple lines. I'll go through and add extra cross-hatching where it's needed later. And like you saw before with the pencil, same thing, just drawing the lines and working through it. Kind of going over to outline everything. I've heard someone ask me before, where do you begin? How do you start? How do you know what to draw? And I think that comes from the perception that you don't have a plan, or even that you need a plan in order to accomplish a drawing. Half the time I don't have a plan, and that's the best way to draw for me, is to just daydream, let it all out, have fun, and not worry. All the little mistakes that might happen through this process, I learned to turn into benefits for my art. Let's say I make a big line across this thing. Well, it'll be an arrow shooting across the screen. I'll just work it through. And no one will ever know, because no one knows your art except for you, honestly. So here, I'm working on the eyeball, the horse. I'm going a little bit slower. And the eye is important because the focus of the viewer is going to be on the eyes and what's looking at the viewer and their experience. I'm not very good at horses. Like, my family grew up around, like, I know of horses because I'm from Texas, and some of my family members had the horses, but I don't know. Their structure is very interesting because they have a lot of different angles on their face, and then the fur shines in a particular way. But yeah, I think if I was to ever own a horse, the Appaloosa horse here would be one I would love to have, or as some kind of stallion or Arabian horse, if I could ever afford such a thing, which will never happen. I don't live in that world. Me's a peasant. If I could own a horse like that and live like a prince, my gosh, how cool would that be? So here, I'm shading in the clothing of Joseph, and he has this really cool indigenous outfit he's wearing. And if I could just have the colors, it'd be great, but we're just going to do black and white because black and white's the way I do things. Filling in all the darks, sometimes I like to do that beforehand because what it does is kind of shape the rest of the image and shows me how much blacks I can put throughout the rest of the page. I even sometimes just scribble black and see what happens just to see if I could create a whole new imaginative design or idea of a character. With a horse, I'm going through and doing straight lines kind of at an angle, and then I'll start actually not cross hatching, but doing lines near it, the straight lines at a different angle, and that'll give the illusion of fur or kind of a messy fur. And yeah, you'll see it happen. Right now, since the face is such a sharp featured thing on the horse, I'm kind of keeping the line straight. But yeah, so Nez Perce people eventually were pushed back to the Bear Paw Mountains in September of 1877 by the U.S. forces. And then Joseph was like, by October, he was like, I'm done fighting. This is ridiculous. I'm losing too many people. It's nonstop. The winters and the terrain, and let's just settle this. And he gave his last monumental speech, which said, "I will fight no more forever." And yeah, that echoed across the landscape, signaling the end of the valiant struggle of the Nez Perce people and Joseph. What a cool guy, and what a cool story this is, because the indigenous people have lost a lot of their history and their culture, their language, due to the oppression that the United States has put on them. And as an American, as a person who grew up here in the 90s and early 2000s and everything, there is so much culture in America that could be released if we fought for the right things and we didn't put all our attention to things that didn't really matter. But it's not for me to say those things, and the things that are important to you maybe not important to me, and vice versa. But I would say that if you do live in America, you live in North America or Canada, we have an obligation to respect the original caretakers of the land, and the indigenous are those people. They have nurtured the land. Yes, they've fought other tribes and other people groups in that time period, but that's nothing compared to genocide that the Americas and Canada has slowly been doing since the beginning. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, and you're like, well, that sounds ridiculous. How can America be doing this? I just beg you to go to any community or reservation and ask the people, and you can find any single one of them, and I can almost promise you they will tell you haven't even seen a fraction of the truth, because our textbooks aren't full of actual truth. It's just a bias of American, honestly, it's propaganda. But all countries do this, all countries. So you can't really blame America for it, because every country needs to defend itself and really promote encouraging citizens as well as future soldiers and so on. I know that there is a need to fight for a lot of different causes, but the cause I'm fighting for right now with my wife is the indigenous one, and that's because with the residential schools and the police force against the indigenous, it's a hidden genocide. It's very, very, very evil in many ways from both countries and governments, and it's also been perpetuated by the religious Christian community. And that is something I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for freedom of it and helping people in the indigenous communities to kind of showcase the beauty of their culture and their people and their traditions. And that's what hopefully the documentary will do, as well as the website and other things. But the art that I'm producing right now is also to help bring education and awareness to people. I will write a blog on this and give as much information as I can for people to, just have information. The website I'm building is actually going to be quite intense. It's going to be quite the database, but that's going to take some time. As we're drawing here, you can see that I'm using the micron pen to kind of fill in these details. Sorry, it's late at night. And I've got a lot of cross hatching on the pants of Joseph here. And that's the texture that I want to give, this kind of knitted texture. The side part here is the saddle, lower ends where the cloth is covering. Now the indigenous didn't necessarily, in a lot of the photos I didn't see them using saddles, but in the more modern time I saw them using it. I wonder why. I mean, I guess they wouldn't need the saddle, but I wonder if they had the technology there, why wasn't there a pursued technology for them? Maybe they felt like it was too much of a restraint for the creature, the animal, or the horse, and it was like, we just want them to be free and use them when they come along. I don't know. This is something really cool to explore, though. There's a lot of respect they have for animals, and that's probably the coolest thing of the American culture, is that the indigenous, the religion and the spirituality of many of the indigenous was portrayed through animals, the eagle, the bear, the coyote. But these days, when we look at the American culture and say, okay, what did it bring? We really only just see Western, kind of a Christian tone over everything. I think if we were to dive back into the history of the indigenous and the culture and spirituality, we'd find a lot more rich imagination and stories, history and all. If you can hear that is my dog snoring. He is bored out of his mind. He's snoring. So here, finishing up on the horse's coat, you can see how the different angles of a fur kind of line it out, and you get the vibe that, okay, so the hair's combed this way, but there's some roughed up parts. That's what I was trying to go for, and give that little shimmer. Now that I'm done with the horse and Joseph, I'm starting to draw I want to draw the face of Joseph as an older gentleman, kind of more of a penciled out, realistic look. I'm only doing this because I want to, because most people are going to look at this pen inking and be like, oh, who is this guy? I don't know who this is. So drawing a pencil version and making it realistic is going to at least allow the viewer to go, oh, this is Joseph. And then when they see the inking, they go, oh, this must be a version of Joseph. Not his father, Joseph of Nez Perce. How very cool. Now blocking out and shading, I'm using a reference of Joseph. Don't think I'm just designing Joseph's face out of my mind. If I was that talented, well, it'd be a different case of life. This is a photo reference I got off of Pinterest. And he only had like 6 photos. Oh, see, there we go. And as you can see, I finished. That's him. And then the feathers. Wasn't really sure if I wanted to place the feathers on there. and draw them all out. So I kind of just simplified everything to give the illusion that they're there. Yeah, I love pencil. I felt like I spent more time and you'd have more contrast on this, but I also wanted to give it a faded look. I hope that this thing will fade out further. I like everything that looks old and kind of gritty and ancient, so my artwork is messy in order to give that. I mean messy, I leave ink smudges and pencil marks and stuff like that on there. Now this is the 2H I think I was talking about, or the 4H. You can see how light it is compared to the blue 4B that I was using, or 5B. I'll probably add a few more details into this, but not go into too much details of the feathers. And below I'm going to draw a map to kind of give details. It's just supposed to feel like I've documented my research of the indigenous tribe of the Nez Perce, or at least Joseph here, not the Nez Perce. I think I'll need a whole nother page of all the cool things that the Nez Perce are known for. But at least I got the horse in there, and some of the tribal gear and Joseph. I really enjoy just drawing with a pencil and, not always inking things. I think inking is, I love inking. It's you're watching the Inktology because I love ink. I think that's all I'm going to do for this pencil drawing here. I'm going to move on to the map. So I drew this out. I thought I had a recording. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm just shading. It's all shaky because I'm holding it to get this close. But you can see I just made a little square, made a grid, and then found the location of the reservation. And then underneath I wrote in ink the quote, one of the quotes he says that I enjoyed. It wasn't his most famous quote, I think, but it's fun. No. And there you go. Nez Perce, Wallowa Valley. Then I'm going to ink it, give it more definition. This kind of drawing here is going to fade over time if I don't ink it, so I definitely wanted to make sure I had, permanent lines. That's it, just doing dots all the way around. Not very exciting, but you get the point. Yeah. And then doing the rivers, I try to do them as accurate as possible. I didn't include all the little mini streams in there. I think this was too small for me to do, and I just want to hit the major and make it my own style map. I'm very fascinated with map making. I think people who do it are just fascinating people in themselves, with all the intricate kind of, I feel like there's a lot of math and there's a lot of like studies and really cool things you can do with maps, and that's an awesome art. I think that is not, I've rarely hear about it, but I'm sure it's an amazing, it takes a very awesome talent to do it. Seems also time consuming. I'd be so mad if I worked so hard on a little neighborhood and then I drew it wrong and had to start all over, and So after drawing the lines, that's it, I'm done. There's the quote. It makes my heart sick when I remember all the good words and the broken promises. Or all the broken promises. This is Chief Joseph as an older man, penciled in. This is the younger version of him on an Appaloosa horse. I hope you guys enjoyed this and liked the drawing. Also, hope it educated you a little bit more on the Nez Perce and Chief Joseph and his story. If you like it, please like and subscribe, and comment if I made any mistakes or I didn't include something or I got something wrong. I'm not the all-knowing, but I do hope you enjoyed this video. And on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed the story of Chief Joseph and my drawing style of him. And remember to keep creating and keep learning.